welcome back to the show. Today's episode is one I've been genuinely excited to record because we're talking about something that's everywhere right now. Weight loss resistance, midlife hormones, metabolism, fatigue, and peptides. But we're going to talk about it in a way that's grounded, strategic, and focused on long-term health. If you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, you're eating clean, you're working out, you're tracking, you're trying to be consistent, and your body still won't respond, this episode is for you. Because what we're unpacking today is that for many people, especially in midlife, the problem isn't willpower. It's not that you just need to try harder. It's that the physiology has changed. Your hormones are shifting. Metabolism adapts. Stress and sleep start to matter even more. Thyroid function can become more sensitive. Gut function can change. And what used to work in your 20s and 30s suddenly stops working, or worse, it backfires. So we're getting into why traditional dieting fails for so many high-achieving women and busy professionals, and what's actually driving weight loss resistance beneath the surface. We're talking about the root cause behind stubborn weight, fatigue, and burnout, and what it really looks like to rebuild health from the inside out, rather than balancing between extremes or bouncing between extremes. And to guide us through this conversation, I'm joined by somebody who lives at the intersection of root cause medicine and performance-based outcomes. Dr. Aleksandra Gajer is a board-certified physician and a leading expert in metabolic health, hormone balance, and performance medicine. She's the founder of the Gajer practice, where she specializes in root cause medicine and cutting-edge peptide therapy to help patients optimize metabolism, energy, hormones, and long-term vitality. With more than 12 years of clinical experience, Dr. Gajer has helped thousands of patients, particularly high-achieving professional and midlife women, overcome stubborn weight gain, fatigue, hormonal imbalances, and burnout. She's a contributing author to the best-selling book Triumphs of Transformation and has been featured on Good Day DC, Good Morning Washington, and numerous health podcasts nationwide. In this episode, we're walking through a framework that I think is incredibly helpful, especially because peptides are often discussed like they're a trend or a shortcut. And today's conversation makes it clear peptides are tools, powerful tools, but they need to be used correctly in the right patient at the right time with the right monitoring. We also talk about why peptides should be managed and overseen by providers who actually understand them and use them regularly. Not a quick telehealth situation, not a pop-up clinic, and definitely not something sourced online without proper medical oversight. And we touch on why the source matters so much for safety, consistency, and outcomes. We also break peptides into 5 categories in a way that's easy to understand. First, metabolic health and body recomposition, where therapies like GLP-1s come in, and we also touch on MOTS-C. Then growth hormone-related peptides, including options like CJC with ipamorelin, tesmorelin, and simorelin. We talk about recovery and inflammation support, which is the second category, like BPC, and we sometimes combine these with growth hormone peptides depending on the situation. The third category we talk about are cognitive peptides like Cmax and Salonc. We then transition to longevity peptides like epitalin. And then we look at beauty-focused peptides at the end, like GHK-Cu. We briefly touched on NAD and SS31 and how these fit into broader conversations around energy, performance, and cellular health. Now, quick note before we jump in. This episode is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not medical advice. If you're taking medications, especially thyroid hormone or metabolic medications, even blood pressure medications or cholesterol medications, do not change anything based on this podcast. Always talk to your own qualified provider, and please don't buy peptides online and self-direct treatments. Safety first, always. All right, this is a great one. Let's get into it. So today we have Dr. Aleksandra Gajer, and she has agreed to come on to the podcast. I think you guys are going to love this. I want to start by just letting listeners know in about 2 to 3 minutes, what do you kind of do every day? What is your background? How did you get here?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So again, I'm Dr. Aleksandra Gajer. I am a board certified physician. I started my career in conventional medicine, in emergency medicine, actually. I went to conventional medical school, University of Maryland in Baltimore, and then I chose to do an emergency medicine residency. I liked the pace. I liked being at ground zero with people. I liked being able to fix things somewhat quickly. And like a lot of people, I got burned out pretty fast. And I got to be in the ER during COVID, which was quite a rough time. And I also felt sort of disillusioned with our practice of medicine in this country. We put a lot of band-aids on chronic conditions, and I
Mhm.
found that the people that I was seeing in the ER with diabetes and kidney disease and all these things, they were just coming back worse and worse until one day they would die in our ER. And, we would get them through their episodes, but things weren't getting better. No one was getting healthier. And we could sort of just get you through this next thing, but I didn't feel like people were actually on the road to getting better in any real way. So I started studying more of this sort of integrative regenerative medicine. When I was still in the ER, I spent a few years really diving deep into the science that's available now about creating health. What actually works to create this state of health so people never get that sick, that they're falling apart and we have to put them back together. And I got the opportunity to buy a practice from a retiring doctor, an internal medicine practice that had a weight loss program. And over the past 3 years, I've kind of revitalized that practice to work more on this sort of goal of creating health for people. So we do that by addressing metabolic health and weight, which I think is a foundation of health. We do that by hormone balancing and by something that I call regenerative or performance medicine, which is basically how can we support and heal your body at a cellular level so that you feel good, you sleep good, you have good energy, you exercise well, you have good sex, all the good things in life, and you live a long time without developing chronic illnesses. So that's kind of where I live in the medical space now.
Yes. So I love that. And that's why I'm so happy you're here. So you really realize I say this all the time. Like we use ERs like band-aids and we also use ERs like primary care in this country. And the way we practice medicine is just band-aid and everything instead of looking at the root cause and figuring out how do we actually help this person. And so for people that are listening, we're going to talk a lot today about stubborn weight loss and hormonal changes in midlife. We're going to talk a lot about peptide therapy, which I'm excited about. But how do you define root cause medicine? And, for people that are listening, like what define root cause medicine to them?
Sure. So for me, root cause medicine means looking at what is actually driving your illness or disease or the fact that you're not feeling well or sleeping well or having good energy. So it seems really basic and fundamental, but we've kind of lost that in conventional medicine. Our thought process is usually about how do we treat this symptom? How do we make this less burdensome? How do we prevent you from dying from this? But if we take a few steps back and say, how did we end up here? Why did you become diabetic? Why did you become, okay, you became insulin resistant. So why did you become insulin resistant? What happens in the body for that to happen? And then try to reverse each one of these steps and create a cellular environment, an environment in your body that allows health to flourish and illness to resolve or heal. And my job is really, I love getting people off medications, which we're often able to do. I think medications are great tools and I use them when it's appropriate in the right setting. And, conventional medicine has bought us an extra 20, 30 years of life. And I think it's super useful for treating cancer and getting you through that accident and all these things. But we've lost sight on how to support our bodies to stay healthy in those extra decades that we gained.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. If you get to the actual root cause of what's causing someone to need medications, to gain weight, have all the issues they're having and actually address that, you get a lot farther than just band-aiding people with prescriptions, which is what we're taught in medical school, to be fair, right? Like we're taught everyone fits in these boxes, diseases have, these, this is what if you have high blood pressure, which means your blood pressure is over this amount, then you immediately prescribe this medication. We're not taught like talk about salt intake, talk about sugar intake, talk about exercise, and it's just kind of crazy. And so we need to go back to root cause. We need to teach people about root cause in medical school and just patients. And so I'm excited that, I love having people on here who think like that. And the fact that you used to be an emergency room doctor is is even kind of cooler because you've seen the whole spectrum. I want to start with, why do you think traditional dieting fails? Like, what actually drives weight loss resistance? Is it just that we're band-aiding things? Is it that doctors, I find that if people come to me and say, well, I went to my doctor, I'm trying to lose weight, and they wrote me a prescription for phentermine, or they told me to exercise more and eat less, or they give you these crazy things to do that have nothing to do with looking at the root cause, right? So
Yeah,
talk to me about
yeah,
that.
yeah. And we've sort of dug ourselves into a hole in this country, especially in the last 50
Mhm.
years, with when it comes to our weight. 50 years ago, we know that most people were not overweight, and there's a lot of factors that happened, and some of them were good things. Women gained the right to work, so they were no longer at home cooking food, and we started to get more industry, and we needed faster options. And then at one point, doctors, scientists realized that our rates of heart disease were going up. And there were some studies that I think were very misleading that really blamed fat on basically all our health
Mhm.
problems and our rise in heart disease, which I don't want to go into now, but was clearly multifactorial and probably not all that related to saturated fat. And our entire food landscape changed to be highly processed. Anyone who grew up, especially in the late 80s, 90s, everything was low fat, and you were told to eat these carby snacks, that were processed and manufactured. And all doctors were taught is to tell people to, the caloric model, calories in, calories out. So move more, eat less, and you'll lose weight. And I think the saddest thing that happened during this time period too is that we made people feel like it's their fault. We had this massive shift in our entire population where suddenly most people are overweight. And then we also, at the same time, had doctors with not enough knowledge telling them, well, why are you eating so much?
Mhm.
While the food industry and food science was becoming so much more sophisticated to create foods that literally hijack the appetite centers in our brain, the reward centers, making it impossible to stop. So we found ourselves in this catch-22 where we were eating foods that were really bad for our metabolism. People became more insulin resistant. There was more chemical interference with our gut microbiome. There was more toxic exposures. So our metabolism crashed, and nobody can really outrun a really poor metabolism. And so I think now we're trying to dig ourselves out of that situation a little bit, and we understand the science behind metabolic health a little bit better, particularly what drives weight gain. That, I think one of the most powerful tools is going back to eating real foods
Mhm.
that can support our bodies, food that came from the ground, meat products that are not treated with antibiotics and hormones. So I think we are at this place where we can reframe this a little bit and say, how can we fix our metabolism? We can talk a little bit more about that. We can talk about insulin resistance, metabolism, and what actually drives that. But I think that the most important thing is that we need to reframe the way we've thought about this.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I also think, it's kind of sad. Like, I saw this sort of meme that was so true. It was kind of nauseating, but like, it was a bunch of people sitting around eating all of this fast food, and it said, the food industries slowly poisoned us until we decided it was normal, right? And it's
Right.
true. Like, I'm sure in the 50s when people were eating McDonald's and different things, it was like, oh, it was a treat. And then it was
Yeah.
almost like propaganda as to, oh, you need to do this. It's fast food. It's good for you. And we've just continued to allow more and more things into our diet that are poison until it's mainstream. And so, like, for instance, when I go out to eat, sometimes with people in a group of people, if I order a salad or roasted vegetables, like if I get a steak and roasted vegetables or a salad and chicken, or it's like, are you on a diet? I'm like, nope, this is just how I eat. Like, but it's like, why are you attacking me when you're eating cheeseburgers, French fries, or fried chicken sandwiches? I mean, that's not normal. But it's almost like we've unnormalized what normal should be, and it's not necessarily people's fault. Like you said, it's the food industry, it's the media. Like, I think there should be huge regulation. We regulate so many things, right? We regulate, like, why don't we regulate what commercials can be put on TV or what propaganda can be put towards children when it comes to food, And I think currently we're working on that in this country. The whole flipping the food pyramid upside down is
Hmm.
super exciting, right? But it's not necessarily people's fault because that's just what they know. And then they go to a doctor, and unfortunately, doctors have, maybe 1 hour of education on nutrition. And so then doctors, I have cardiologists in Oklahoma City who have told patients to drink Diet Coke and Coke Zero and just drink that and then you'll feel better. Like you won't, you'll lose weight. And I'm like, there's so many issues here with what that Diet Coke
Right.
is doing to your gut, the fact that it's dehydrating, it's just people don't know. And so I think they're doing the best they can. But to your point, like we've just got to go back to very basic things. Like I get questioned all the time about my food choices and different things. And I'm like, I'm eating what my grandma would have eaten like 50 years ago. It's
Right.
not rocket science here, right? Like I eat at home for the most part. If I go to a restaurant, it's really easy. You just ask for no sauce, you ask for a piece of meat and some grilled vegetables. It's really not rocket science. It's just we've made all this propaganda and like we have literally brainwashed people into thinking that poison is okay. Right? It's okay to give your kids donuts and sprinkles and food coloring and dye and additives. Yet kids are all-time obese, have ADHD, have learning disabilities, but it's okay because they need sprinkles and they need color. It's crazy in my opinion. It's not.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, not to get too far down this road, but I think that even as doctors and medical professions, we've been brainwashed to worship at the house of pharma. You know what I mean? Where
Mhm.
like even 50, 70 years ago, people understood that what you ate matters, and there were a lot more home remedies, and you use this food for this, and good nutrition. But I think that doctors who wanted to talk about nutrition were sort of shamed and put down. And we have this incredible science now behind drugs and medications that medicine really went in that direction where we're ignoring the fundamental aspect of health where we actually rebuild our entire body every few years. Like all the cells are new, you're building that out of the food you eat. And so it seems so basic, but I think in medicine we've lost that. As a population, we've been brainwashed to think that this is normal. And
Yeah, and it all comes. I tell people this all the time. You are what you eat. Like it all comes back to your gut. I will stand. I will scream that until I die. Like it just
mhm.
matters what you eat. Like it matters on your skin. It matters with your insulin, with your hormones, with your thyroid. And we have to get people to understand that.
Yeah,
So
100%.
sorry. So I love that. Yes, I think this is all very good information. So I want to segue this into peptide therapy, and we're going to come back to hormones. But you do a lot of peptides. We were talking about before, and talking about pharmaceuticals. I am embarrassed, ashamed to tell you that I worked for pharmaceutical companies when I first got out of fellowship. Now I did clinical trials for them in fellowship for medications like Ozempic and Monjaro. Like I did a lot of diabetes trials. But then I worked for pharmaceutical companies and I was that doctor that was like, yes, let's just write you medications because that's what they teach you. And that's what's
Hmm.
supposed to make people better. After 3 years of me realizing people keep coming back fatter, sicker, on more medicines, I was like, something's not right. Right. In 2020, thankfully, I got out of that world. But I think the other reason that people don't do what we do is because it's hard. Not that it's hard, it takes time, right? Like it's not
Hmm.
easy. Joke with my husband all the time. Like, if I just wrote scripts like other doctors, my job would be so easy. I wouldn't have to think. I wouldn't have to be
Hmm.
emotionally involved. I wouldn't have to think about physiology. Like, you just write a script and walk off, like
Hmm.
SSRIs and it's insane. But so peptides, I don't look at those as medication. So I look at peptides as, a string of amino acids, something that a lot of times your body naturally makes things like these. But I look at these as tools to help your body, like you said, rebuild itself, help your cells to rebuild themselves, help everything to start working better together, right? Our body's a big piece. Every organ system works. My book coming out later this year talks about how your gut directly affects every hormone in your body and how every hormone in your body feeds on each other and feeds back to your gut. So tell listeners, I guess, what peptides are, why you like them, and then explain to them like you did me, how you look at peptides in different categories.
Yeah, absolutely. So peptides are chemical messengers within our bodies.
Mhm.
So they're small strings of amino acids. Are all the cells and organs in our bodies need to communicate with each other to stimulate certain pathways. And we're all familiar with hormones. We know that hormones are messengers and they come from special places called endocrine glands. Peptides are similar, but they just can message through a different pathways within the body. And like you, I agree that they're not like traditional medications. And what makes them different is that they usually are an analog or a copy of something we naturally produce in the body, and they stimulate a natural pathway. So most
Mhm.
drugs they either force or block a pathway, and they need to be metabolized or broken down by our kidneys or our liver. And sometimes there are toxic metabolites, there's things that stay in our bodies. Peptides don't do that. They don't block or force a pathway. They usually bind a very specific receptor on a cell, and then they induce a chemical reaction or biological reaction that is favorable to our bodies. And then they're just broken down to the amino acids that they're made of and digested. So they put no strain on the kidneys or the liver. And the feedback loops that naturally work in our bodies are preserved with most peptides. So, although there's a lot of controversy about peptides now, I think peptides are really safe and they can work with our bodies. If you've ever heard the term epigenetics, it's how our genes are expressed. You know, it's really important. We're born with our genes, can't do much about our genetic makeup, but we can affect how they're expressed, and peptides can influence some of those positive epigenetic changes so that we're healthier. So, like we talked a little bit about in the beginning, what can peptides do? And I usually think about them in five categories. And the first is metabolic health and body composition. So that's weight loss, muscle gain, making sure that you don't become diabetic or pre diabetic. Metabolic health is really the foundation, I think, of
Mhm.
chronic disease prevention, and it is at the root of the number one killers in the United States, like heart disease, and also a lot of cancers, dementia. A lot of our chronic illnesses are tied to our metabolic health. The
Mhm.
second category is recovery and inflammation. So I think this is another foundational aspect of health, and you've talked a lot about gut health, and I love that because that's most of our immune system lives in the gut. And when we look at cancer and again a number of chronic diseases, we know that inflammation and an imbalanced immune system is what's driving a lot of those chronic illnesses that are causing us to lose our quality of life or perhaps die earlier than we would otherwise. So the third category of peptides are those for cognitive health or brain health. I think these are really exciting because, you know, for you mentioned SSRIs too. For the longest time, we were taught in medical school that people are depressed because they don't have enough serotonin. But there was actually no science to back that up.
Right.
There was no way to actually measure it. We were just like, let's give them back more serotonin, see if they get happier. But that whole concept that people with anxiety, depression have imbalanced neurotransmitters has never been proven. I think the more recent research is around neuroinflammation, microglial
Mhm.
activation, and we have peptides that can support brain health by reducing inflammation in the brain, by increasing things like brain derived neurotropic factor, which is kind of the juice that your neurons feed on, and work in a way that works with your body a little bit better. So these are really cool peptides that can prevent dementia, brain fog, and
And yes, and like you said, inflammation. So, glucose, metabolic issues, insulin drive issues with our cognition, right? So, like when your blood sugar is high, it affects your neurons and it affects your cognitive function. So, it's wild to me that when people have all this anxiety, depression, nobody thinks like, well, should we look at their glucose? Should we look at
right.
their gut, right? You know, we make so much of our serotonin in our gut. I saw a girl yesterday who was 35 who I saw 3 months ago, and she was on all these antidepressants. And I'm like, sister, what are you eating? You know, she has like a newborn baby, and she's like, oh, Taco Bell, McDonald's. And I was like, we did a gut study on her. It was atrocious. And so literally in
Hmm.
3 months, all we did was work on her gut. I tried to wean some of these medicines off. I gave her a methylated B vitamin. I talked to her yesterday. She said, I feel 90% better. And she's down to one medication. And so we stopped it yesterday. We're going to give her some SAMe and like, but she's like, I mean, I don't know. I guess this whole gut stuff actually works. And I'm like, yeah, because you don't have all this inflammation in your brain and the sugar and right. I mean, and so it's just, it's crazy. So yeah, I do think it's just really important when people are having a lot of anxiety and depression issues that we do look at and focus on their gut in addition to like insulin levels and things like that. Because in this girl, if we would have looked at her gut instead of just continuing to add on medications for anxiety and depression, she wouldn't have been on three or four medications having all these bad side effects. So I love that you brought that up with, cognition and inflammation. So we have metabolic and body composition peptides, we have recovery and inflammation peptides, we have cognitive and brain inflammation peptides. What are the two other classes of peptides you typically think about?
Yeah, so the last two are longevity and aesthetics. So,
Okay.
longevity peptides, there are a number of longevity peptides now where we're starting to see some promising research where we may be able to extend life and also extend the period of time that we're healthy or our health span. So, there are some peptides in this category that improve mitochondrial health, which is how you produce energy. There are some that protects telomeres, which protect our DNA from aging, and some that prevent immune system aging and immune system dysregulation. So, another cool, promising category of peptides. And lastly is aesthetic peptides. So I think that, with this extra 20, 30 years of life, we get to live in bodies that we feel good in, that we feel comfortable in. So there are a number of peptides that improve our collagen and our skin, our elastin, and basically give us that youthful glow that we can enjoy and feel really good about, and that also help with hair growth and all those things.
Yeah. So I love that. So I know listeners now are like, okay, what are all the peptides? So we're going to go into like the top ones of those five. But before we go there, I want you to tell me, I think this is a really important question. What do you
Mhm.
think the root cause is, or the root causes, the main thing behind things like fatigue, stubborn weight gain, burnout, just these issues that millions of Americans face? What is like the root underlying cause? Is there one thing? Is it a combination of things? Like I'm a big proponent of insulin. I think it's inflammation. It's driven by inflammation, which a lot of it comes from insulin and a lot of it comes from your gut. But I'm curious to know your thought of root causes behind, weight gain, fatigue, brain fog, which is what 95% of women coming to us complaining about.
Yeah, it's such a great question. And yes, this is the pandemic that we're dealing with now, the epidemic of all those things. And I'm with you that, I think that the three main things are our metabolic health, our hormone health, and inflammation. And the number one symptom of inflammation is fatigue. And most fatigue is actually probably driven by inflammation. And I think inflammation is a complicated term. It's one that's misunderstood, but it is an immune system that's out of balance. So the job of our immune system is to fight viruses, bacteria, things that aren't supposed to be there, seek out cancer cells and kill them. But because we're exposed to so many chemicals in our environment and non-food chemicals that we eat, our bodies get confused. And now they think that these chemicals are something foreign. And we start having this immune response at a time when there shouldn't be one. And everybody has a low level of the flu all the time. And when you are inflamed, our cortisol levels go up, which tell our bodies just to store fat. It's very difficult to lose weight in an inflamed body. Hormones are affected by inflammation the other way around. Hormones help manage inflammation as well. So I think it is a balance of those three things of this kind of inflamed bodies that a lot of us are living in, again because it feels like the world and the food environment is normal, and that disrupting our metabolic and hormone health as well.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. The inflammation is what drives the disruption of the hormones, of the thyroid, of
Mhm.
our weight, and so I just I really want, I mean, maybe that's going to be my next book. I'm just going to talk about all inflammation, but that's kind of what this book talks about. It's just how inflammation, which typically comes from our gut, it can come from lots of places, but a lot of times it comes from our gut, how that then affects all of our other hormones. So I like other people's opinion because some people have other opinions. I talked to somebody who thinks it's a nitric oxide deficiency. I mean, fine, but nitric oxide deficiency causes inflammation. And so the other question I want to ask before we circle back to peptides is tell us, like, give me a 3 to 5 minute answer to how hormones and metabolism change in midlife. Because I want to take this. I mean, everyone that listens to this for the most part is having hormone metabolism issues. A lot of us are in our midlife. How are those things changing in midlife? And then I want to segue that into like, how can peptides help us with some of that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I like to think about this in a broader context of our human existence on Earth. So we've been here for about 300,000 years. So that's a long
Mhm.
time. And our life expectancy was around 40 or 45 for like 198,000 of those years. So, or 298,000 of those years,
Yeah.
it's when we think about it as a percentage of the time we've been on Earth, we've only lived this long for like a millisecond. And we have this ancient machinery. We have these genes that are really adapted to keep us optimized to have children and then die, because that's what we did for the longest time. So we are in this situation now where we are living longer and we get these extra 30, 40 years, whatever it ends up being. But our hormones naturally decline. The body is trying to save energy. It assumes that we've already done our part of reproducing. And so the body down regulates the amount of hormones it produces. And in women, this shows up as perimenopause. In those perimenopausal years, we go on an estrogen roller coaster where estrogen's high and then low, high and then low. And our progesterone is steadily declining. Testosterone declines to different degrees in different women, but that often causes a state of insulin resistance, in particular the estrogen. Insulin is the main hormone that governs our metabolism. Insulin is a fat storage hormone.
Mhm.
So if you've
Mhm.
ever been around someone who is a type 1 diabetic who doesn't make insulin and they're not taking their insulin, they get very, very thin. People who are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes who don't make insulin are unable to put on body fat. So that insulin resistance happens as a result of the inflammation that has accumulated in our body, the declining hormones, and then it becomes very challenging to maintain a healthy weight as our hormones are changing and we become more insulin resistant. Insulin resistance means that our body is not listening to insulin the way that it used to. And so the pancreas is pumping out more and more and more, which is actually sending the signal to store fat.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is like that change in hormones just starts to disrupt, a cascade of things, right? We lose our insulin or we lose our estrogen, which then makes us more insulin resistant. It also affects our gut tremendously. Estrogen helps keep the microbiome of our gut very balanced. And so when we lose our estrogen, we get dysbiosis. That causes gut issues, which causes more inflammation, makes our insulin even higher. As we lose our progesterone, our cortisol levels go up. As we lose our testosterone, we start losing muscle mass. All these things compound. The inflammation in our gut causes our thyroid hormone to not convert correctly. Now we're not sleeping well. Our IGF-1 levels are changing. I mean, it's just this big, and to your point, I guess I sort of thought about this, but we usually only lived till we were like 40 or 45, maybe 50. So it wasn't like a big issue because as these things started to develop, people just died. And now women, and in the 50s, 60s, 70s, women, like, we just dealt with this menopause. We were told it was part of aging. I feel terrible for those women. They went through menopause. They didn't have hormones. And now that we are demanding equal health care as men, and there's actually some research going into it. I mean, women are also not the same as men. I say this all the time, right? We are a little more complex. We do create and maintain and make life, have babies. So we're not as easy as men. We're not the same as men. But it's just there are a lot of changes that happen, and now that we're living longer, we have to figure out how do we facilitate a life past that and make people stay metabolically healthy with those changes, right? And so I think
Yeah.
that's where a lot of women get shamed and gaslit by providers because providers don't know what to say to them. Because what we learned in school was, yeah, menopause is terrible. Just write them an SSRI. Hormones are bad. They'll deal with it. Right. I mean,
Right.
did you learn anything differently? Because I didn't. And I went to a fellowship on hormones, diabetes, and metabolism.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. Right. No,
Right.
absolutely. And when you think about it, there's no other in almost every other condition that we treat in medicine, if you are not producing something, let's say your thyroid is not working, you're not producing any thyroid, of course you get thyroid back. If you
Right.
are a diabetic and you can't produce insulin, we give you insulin. If you're a man,
Mhm.
you don't make enough testosterone, you get testosterone. But
Right.
women, no, 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 no. You just deal with it. We're not going to look into this any further. And yeah,
Right. Okay. So now that we have all that established, let's go back to the peptides because people, I mean, I get
Mhm.
asked about peptides all the time. I love them. We use them in our practice and we change a lot of lives. So the metabolic body composition peptides, give me like the top three that you think are useful for metabolic issues. And we're talking, I'm assuming insulin resistance, we're talking prediabetes, we're talking obesity for the most part, and then just
Yeah.
maybe even sarcopenia, like wanting to make more muscle mass. What peptides are we talking about in general?
Yeah. So I think there's no way of talking about this without talking about the GLP-1s. They
Yeah.
are what have really popularized peptides, and the GLP-1 agonists such as Ozempic,
Mhm.
Mounjaro, Zepbound, Wegovy, they kind of proved that this class of compounds is effective and can change our physiology in a positive way. So those drugs are peptides. I think that at higher doses they start acting like medications rather than more like
Mhm.
drugs than peptides, but at low doses they are peptides. They increase production of what's called GLP-1, which slows down the transit of food
Mhm.
through your gut, reduces cravings for less healthy foods. And I think those can be really useful if they're used correctly. I prefer to use them at lower doses and not to crank through doses really quickly because that leads to muscle loss and that leads to a situation where it's hard to come off of them and maintain your new weight. So I think that that is in the mix if it's used correctly. The other peptide that I really like, especially for you mentioned prediabetes, insulin resistance, is something called MOTS-c, which is a
Mhm.
mitochondrial peptide. There are studies that show that it can improve insulin sensitivity by 15 to 20%, which is a big deal. And after you've become, it takes a long time to become insulin resistant, which means that your cells are no longer listening to that insulin signal. And having a tool that can
Mhm.
actually improve the way your cells are listening to insulin can be huge. So MOTS-c, I think, is a really great tool. It also improves our mitochondrial health. So most of the time people feel like they have more energy, that they are feeling better when they're on
Mhm.
this. And there are growth hormone promoting peptides, which I think are also popular and really cool for body composition. So like the GLP-1s raise levels of GLP-1, growth hormone promoting peptides such as samorelin,
Mhm.
ipamorelin, CJC, tesamorelin, lots of
Mhm.
different names. All of these increase our body's production of growth hormone, and that allows us to turn more fat into muscle. It allows us to build more muscle from our strength training and our workouts. It also improves sleep, which is also another major factor when it comes to being able to maintain a healthy metabolism. We need that repair time at night, and growth hormone promoting peptides just improve our deep sleep and the quality of sleep. So I will sometimes use the three of these in a combination and keep the GLP-1 really low in
Mhm.
order to sort of optimize physiology, to really get into fat burning in such a way that we can get in and get out and not be stuck on a drug forever.
Yeah, I love that. I love the GLP-1s. I like all of them. I really like retatrutide too.
Oh,
You know, the
me too.
anabolic part of retatrutide. And to your point, in very low doses, you don't need massive doses of these. I love MOTS-C. I actually have several type 1 diabetics that take MOTS-C and do really well on it. So I do like MOTS-C. And then all the growth hormone peptides, definitely love all of those. To your point, sleep. I mean, I think that we really undervalue sleep in this country, and it's something a lot of people struggle with. And so I do find people on growth hormone, CJC, ipamorelin, tesmorelin, they do sleep better and deeper. And that is, I mean, I take some peptides to help me sleep, and you just feel like a different person when you get really good sleep. And so I could not agree more with any of those. Now, I would like to say, caveat here, I do not think anyone should buy peptides off of the internet and dose them or give them to themselves. You need to be working with a provider. I don't care if it's cheaper. I mean, a lot of the reason you find cheaper peptides on the internet is because God only knows what they are. No one's validating what they are. And you also need to be working with the provider, because with growth hormone producing peptides or promoting peptides, you want to make sure you don't have an active cancer. You want to make sure we're monitoring liver enzymes. I mean, there are things that need to happen, right? This is just like any other, anything else that you're taking from a provider. Somebody needs to monitor these things for you, and somebody needs to work on the dosing for you. I have a lot of people reach out and say, well, I can ask ChatGPT what dose to do. Well, okay, sure you can. You realize that ChatGPT can hallucinate, can do a lot of things. So I really think it's important because, like, to your point, if you're putting all three of these together, you're going to use very different doses than if you're using them separately. And if you have a provider that understands your hormones, your thyroid, your gut, they're going to dose them differently than just some random guy at the gym who told you to take them, right? And you can actually hurt yourself with these peptides. Like, I've seen it. So I think that you nailed it. Like, I love that. I think those are really good, but I just wanted to throw that caveat in. We're not promoting that you go buy these things on the internet and just start self-medicating with them. You need to find a provider that knows how to help you, right? And I will also say, I almost feel like peptide doctors are kind of like aesthetic clinics that just pop up everywhere. Like, oh, I took a 1-hour course on peptides, so I'm going to start prescribing them. Dangerous, so dangerous.
Very dangerous.
Right? So, like, I would also want to make sure that the person prescribing you those peptides actually knows what those peptides are. Ask them, what is a 503B pharmacy? Do you use one? Ask them the mechanism of action of these peptides. Ask them questions, because you shouldn't just be randomly prescribing people peptides either, because you can hurt someone. Because let's point this out. Actually, if you don't use growth hormone in the right concentrations, you can actually make someone's insulin resistance worse, right? You can make someone's sugar worse. So if you're taking too much of a peptide, it can actually revert and do the wrong thing. So I just wanted to I just wanted to throw that in there. So I love
that point.
Yeah, I love all three of those though. Tell me about your recovery inflammation peptides, because I think mine are. Tell me what yours are.
Yeah. So, of course, the star of the show is BPC 157. And I think when people are diving into peptides after looking at body composition, that's sort of the next one that comes up. We have a lot of clinical experience with BPC 157, which just means that it's been around a long time. It is something that's naturally produced in the gut, and its role is thought to prevent our stomach lining from being broken down by the acid, to sort of protect the stomach lining. Initially, it was studied for the healing of ulcers, which it worked beautifully for. And then it was found that when it's isolated and injected right under the skin, it can make its way to injured tissue and bring the right cellular cascade to those injured tissues so that we heal quicker. I think it's also super useful for gut health and restoring our gut lining, and can also just restore balance in the immune system. So people who are dealing with excessive inflammation, we often see that BPC 157 calms that down.
Especially with KPV, right? Do you ever use BPC and KPV for the gut?
I do. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think KPV works beautifully too. And I think from how I understand it is that it does a little bit better than BPC at teaching your immune system what is self versus non-self, and recognizing things that that are friendly within our bodies that we shouldn't be attacking versus those that we need to go after. So yeah, KPV I think is another really powerful tool. that I use for gut health and also for some of my autoimmune patients suffering from autoimmunity that tends to improve their energy and their levels of inflammation really beautifully. I was going to say that BPC, I do for our athletes, for people who are really trying to put on muscle or trying to perform in a competitive space, will often pair a growth hormone promoting peptide with BPC so that they can recover their muscles and joints can recover quicker after workouts when they're training or preparing for competition. And of course, muscle, I think, is the most valuable asset that you can build within your body. We know that muscle sends out really protective signals to all our other tissues and can protect all the systems in our body. So I think it's worthwhile to potentially make a push at some point in your health journey to really build a lot of muscle. And I think these are compounds that can support that. And especially for people who are dealing with a lot of inflammation, not feeling great, sometimes when you go on something like Samoralin plus BPC 157, you have the energy to go do the workout that you want to do, and you're recovering the way you want to. And those goals or habits that maybe felt out of reach might feel a little bit more attainable. There are a number of other recovery peptides. I think the thymosin alpha 1, thymosin beta 4, all those are options. There's a few others in this category, but I think those are kind of some of the main ones.
Yep, I would agree. BPC and then some form of growth hormone if it's done correctly and safely for you. I love BPC. I've been taking it for a really long time. I can tell a huge difference as a woman, in my 40s now. I'm like, oh my goodness. Like I did a quick workout this morning, like full body with some heavy stuff. And I know that tomorrow I'm going to be like, whereas in my 20s and 30s, I could just like hammer that stuff out. So
yeah, I'm also on a steady dose of BPC, so I'm right there with you.
I mean, I take a lot of peptides and I cycle them too. But talk
Yeah.
to me about cognition. What peptides do you think are the best for cognition?
Yeah, so I have a lot of experience using Selenk and Semax,
Mhm.
and these are peptides that were developed in Russia for their military and cosmonaut programs where people had to function in austere environments for long periods of time under heavy stress. So these peptides help with focus, and Selenk in particular reduces anxiety. So it works on the GABA neurotransmitters as well as reducing that neuroinflammation that we talked about, and also increasing that brain-derived neurotropic factor, that juice that our neurons need to live in order to be healthy. And I think that, those have been really helpful in people who are dealing with brain fog from hormonal changes, dealing with brain fog due to chronic infections or long COVID. It has helped people, just prevent cognitive decline and take care of our brains. And also, I think they have long lasting effects. It's my experience has been you do a few cycles of this and the brain kind of settles out a little bit and maybe you come back
Mhm.
to it later. But I think overall, anxiety, mood, focus, all that can be improved.
I love that. Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Another reason to work with a provider who understands peptides is like you probably aren't going to stay on a peptide forever. Maybe it depends, like depends on what you're using. But I think it's a really good plan. Like what we try to do at Modern Endocrine is like, okay, what are our three top priorities that you want to work on? Okay, now let me give you a peptide or a peptide regimen for like, let's work on one or two, and then let's focus on the other one, like do a lot of cycling, and that's where you need someone to help you with that. Like, what is the most important? How can we cycle it? What can we take with what, and stay safe. And to your point, I think, sometimes cycling them and letting the receptors kind of rest is a good plan. So
Yeah.
tell me, and so those are your main two for cognition, right?
Yeah, I think Pinelion I sometimes throw in there. It is also somewhat of a longevity peptide and a sleep peptide. Pinelion restores the function of your pineal gland and the hormones that we need to maintain our circadian rhythm, our sleep-wake cycles,
Mhm.
and have restful sleep. So I've seen a lot of great results with that, and I think that can
Mhm.
have cognitive and brain protective benefits as well.
Yeah, I really like DSIP as well for sleep. I've been using that recently. Some
Hmm.
people, it's very interesting. Some people, because I like to track things on order rings, are like, I don't really feel like it helps me, but their
Right.
REM sleep and their energy will be much better. I mean, I notice a huge difference whenever I take it versus don't. So, and then sleep is just really important. So
It is.
tell me about your longevity peptides. I'm excited to hear about this too.
Yeah. So I think epitalin is probably the
Mhm.
most promising longevity peptide. Again, another one of these I was developed in Russia, and it protects our telomeres, which are the caps that protect our DNA. And we know that as telomeres get shorter, that is correlated with aging.
Mhm.
So epitalin is kind of a master peptide. It's a master anti-inflammatory, master antioxidant, and there are studies. I know that there's a 12-year study out of Russia that showed a really significant, like 30% reduction in development of chronic disease in patients who were doing regular courses of Epitalin versus those who weren't. And animal studies are showing great longevity benefits where we're seeing, of course, this doesn't necessarily translate to humans, but we're seeing in mice that they're living to a human equivalent of like 120 with Epitalin. So I think that we still need more research, but there's certainly a reduction in the development of chronic disease and potentially a real investment in anti-aging and reversing some of the cellular processes that contribute to aging.
How do you feel about NAD as far as like possibly longevity because of helping with like ATP production, things like that, or SS31?
Yeah. So I think that both of those are really interesting. I think NAD, we know that NAD declines as we get older,
Mhm.
and it is integral in making ATP, or units of energy that are made by mitochondria. And it's usually the one factor that gets depleted the quickest in our bodies when we want to make energy. And so, of course, it's correlated with cellular aging. I think we're probably not 100% there yet on how to use it and to really say this for sure will make you live longer. But I think people feel better. And again, the cells are able
Mhm.
to function more efficiently. And I do think that it's really useful in the prevention of development of chronic illness and preserving our energy stores. And I think it's a really interesting, really useful molecule. And especially again with people who maybe have had long COVID or chronic illnesses where we really need that cellular power. We need that cellular energy in order to marshal the resources to heal from some major setbacks, whether that's burnout or some kind of acute illness. And yeah, we've used a little bit of SS31. I think that is another great peptide to sort of maintain the way your mitochondria is working, which
Mhm.
I think is integral to healthy aging and cellular health, and also
We
helps with your metabolism.
Yeah, we use it a lot in sicker people as well, like the Hashimoto's people, the mold people, just people that have really dysfunctional mitochondria from being sick for a long time. And I think it helps a lot. But, and I don't know the research. I don't know that there's research necessarily on longevity, but I do think that it helps, if you preserve the mitochondrial membrane and help the mitochondria be able to actually release ATP into the cell so the cell can function, then that's a good thing. But I agree. Epitalin is like the longevity, the fountain of youth. And then I'm assuming if we're going to talk about beauty peptides, we're going to talk about GHK,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So tell me what.
I'm curious about your experience with it too, but I think GHKCU is a really cool peptide. It is a copper peptide, and it is a peptide that can improve our collagen, our elastin in
Mhm.
our skin, and speed up our ability to heal. There are topical formulations, one that I put on my face this morning before we spoke.
Mhm.
And there are also the injectable GHKCU formulations that some people have a lot of burning with. So
Mhm.
there's that little bit of a caveat, but I think that it's also a promising peptide and can pair beautifully with like BPC after an aesthetic procedure, like a laser
Mhm.
or microneedling, just to improve the quality of the skin.
Yes. And I've used topical ones. I actually have a cream right now I put on my face that has GHKU and estradiol. And
Nice.
a little bit of hyaluronic acid. Like it's got all these things in it. I love it. But I have done the injectable one as well. I actually did the injectable form in the Glow peptide. So with the BPC and the TB500, I wanted to ask your opinion on this. I don't love mixing peptides. These peptide stacks that people are coming out with, I know it is convenient because it is cheaper and it's in one needle. But when you start putting peptides together, you lose the efficacy, you lose the dosing that you want to give, lots of things. And so I personally don't love them. Do I get them for some of my patients? Yes, because they throw a fit. I used one round of Glow and I was like, I feel like because I stopped my BPC, I was doing a little bit of TB500. I felt more sore. I was like, I'd rather just take I would rather take them separately. But you tell
Yeah.
me your thought on like mixing because, of course we're going to mix everything together because it's easier. But would you rather spend $400 on something that works or $400 on something that doesn't work? So
I'm exactly with you, and I honestly, I'm not a huge fan of these, like, we've got the stacks for social media. These
yeah.
are sort of like your
Uh-huh.
influencer stacks, and
Mhm.
like, you want nicer skin? We can put something together. If you
Mhm.
see a knowledgeable doctor like one of us, we can put something together with your physiology in mind, your background in mind, and make this tailored to you. Yeah, I think usually in the combinations, you're not getting enough of everything. Plus, sometimes people will have a skin reaction. I actually had a skin reaction to the Glow, and then if
Mhm.
they're all combined, then you can't
Right.
manage that.
Well, and also it's like, did you really have a reaction to those peptides? Was it the way they were combined and the way they were breaking down? Because like you've probably taken TB500 by itself. You've probably taken I know you've taken BPC by itself. If
Hmm.
you just took the copper peptide by itself, would you? So it makes a lot of things difficult. And so yes, to your point on social media, it's like, oh, take this Wolverine stack, take this, this person takes this. Okay. Well, I just think they should all be separate, but that's just me.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So I think we got through a lot of really good peptides that are going to be helpful for people. So I appreciate you and your thoughts. My thoughts were like spot on. So we should like, I don't know, do a webinar on this or something.
Yeah, we
Because I
should.
love
Amazing.
peptides and I love, I really love that you can help people feel so much better. Now I will also say this. Peptides are not a miracle drug. So if you're taking these peptides, eating McDonald's, sitting on your butt, doing nothing to help your health, then you should keep your money and not take the peptide. The peptide is the signal to help your body do things correctly when you are making a conducive environment to your body to heal, i.e., seeing the sun, sleeping, moving, eating. Well, that doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but that means you have to be contributing to the environment we're trying to create, right? I also like people to know that because I don't want anyone to spend $500, $1,000, $2,000 on anything that's not going to work you have to do the fundamental basics. But if you do that, this is going to scream at your body, hey, let's make these things work so that we get healthier, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So well said.
Yeah. Okay. So this has been so much fun. I want to ask you 3 questions that I ask everyone to end the podcast. So I want to do that first. What is one food that's most beneficial and why? Don't overthink it. Just first thing that comes to your head.
All right, avocado. I'm putting avocado out there.
I love it. A lot of people say that. Why do you think it's
Yeah.
good?
So it has a lot of the healthy fats that you need in order to produce hormones, in order to stay healthy, to keep your metabolism going. It has polyphenols, which are really important for gut health. And it can be filling while, eating a whole food.
Awesome. What is one thing that anyone listening to this podcast right now could do that would benefit their health that is 100% free?
Prioritize your sleep. Get rid of your phone next to your bed, plug your phone in a different room, and actually set boundaries around it and be strict with yourself around your sleep. It is such a powerful lever, and a lot of times the things that we're trying to fix with drugs, supplements, peptides, sleep enough and things get so much better.
Could not agree more. Last question is what is one thing you wish you would have known about your health 20 years ago that you would have prioritized and done differently?
Wow. Yeah. I think for those of us who went through medical education, we do not get to prioritize our health for many years of our lives. And, I think I wish I understood how foundational the foundations are, like eating
Mhm.
whole foods, getting enough sleep, managing my stress, and having some non-negotiables around how I live life. I think especially as female physicians, we go through much of life not having many boundaries around what we put in our bodies, how we spend our time, how much sleep we
Mhm.
give up. And I do wish in some ways that I had done that sooner and been a little bit more protective of the things that create health in my body.
Amen. But it's never too late, right? So it's
It's
never
never
too
too
late.
late. Absolutely. Look at
You
us
just
now.
you just start, and the more peace you have and the better you feel, the more you really keep those boundaries and keep the people that don't bring peace and the things that make you just feel icky out of your body, right? Out of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Dr. Geyer, I appreciate you coming on. Tell everyone, first of all, where can we find you? Because I'm sure listeners are now like, oh my gosh, who's this lady that's so smart with all these peptides? So where can people find you? And then is there anything we can help you like promote? Anything exciting you have coming up?
Yeah, so you can find us on Instagram at the Gajer Practice, and it's
Mhm.
spelled Gajer. And our website is thegajerpractice.com. And we're actually going to have a dedicated peptide webinar for people who are interested in learning more. And we do these quarterly. We'll have a peptide webinar coming up on January 30th. That's on Zoom. That will be on our social media if people want to sign up and learn a little bit more.
That's awesome. I will maybe
Yeah.
attend.
Very
So we
cool.
will make sure that we link all your stuff in the show notes, and then this will be on social media. So we'll collaborate with you so people can find
Awesome.
you. But I just want to say thank you for being like that pioneer. Sometimes it's hard to be outside the box and do different things, but I know that you take exceptional care of your patients. I'm so glad that you left the ER and are in this functional medicine space and helping guide, and help fix the lives of thousands of people. It's just really neat. And I love it when I find people like this because the work that we're doing is just so impactful and so important. Although it might not be mainstream, it's just really, really needed work. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
And thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Dr. Geyer, thank you so much for coming on and bringing so much clarity to a space that can feel really noisy. I love that we were able to talk about weight loss resistance and midlife metabolism in a way that's both compassionate and practical because so many people feel stuck and blame themselves when what's really needed is a better framework and a better plan. I also really appreciate how clearly she emphasized something that cannot be said enough. Peptides are not a casual trend. They're not something to source online. They're not something to jump into through a quick telehealth appointment or a pop up clinic with minimal evaluation or no ongoing monitoring. These therapies can be incredibly helpful, but they should be managed by a provider who understands peptides, knows how to evaluate the full clinical picture, and knows how to monitor, adjust, and support the patient safely. And I'm glad we reinforced this as well. This episode is not medical advice. If you're listening and thinking, oh, wow, this might apply to me, take that as a prompt to have a thoughtful conversation with your own provider, especially before making any medical changes. If this episode resonated with you, here's what would help us a lot. First, please make sure you're following us on social media at modernendocrine_. We share a lot of education there: hormones, thyroids, metabolic health, gut health. We do tons of webinars and practical tools you can actually use. Second, if you've enjoyed this conversation, please leave a review. Reviews are one of the biggest ways podcasts grow, and they help the right people find this information when they need it most. Third, please share this episode with a friend, a coworker, your mom, your sister, anyone you know who is dealing with fatigue, stubborn weight gain, hormonal imbalances, thyroid concerns, gut health, burnout, or somebody who you know that's doing peptides. If you know someone who's been stuck in the diet harder or do more cycle, this could be the episode that helps them finally understand what's going on and what to do next. And if you're listening and you're thinking you want support, if you want a team that understands hormones, thyroid, gut health, metabolic health, and can actually help you build a plan, consider becoming a patient with us. We're licensed in 43 states, and we would love to help you. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.